Hello there and welcome. You've arrived at a quiet place, where the noise of the day slowly dissolves into silence, and the soft rhythm of words will accompany you until sleep takes your hand. Tonight, we will drift gently along the Nile, through temples of stone and whispers of sand, through pyramids that rise like mountains carved by patience, through myths of gods who watched over fields and skies. We will wander without hurry, because this is not a lesson, not a lecture, but a journey for your mind to rest in. Each fact about ancient Egypt will come to you like a slow breath, something to notice, something to imagine, and then to let go as your eyelids grow heavier. Take a deep breath in, hold it softly, let it go. Feel your shoulders sink a little deeper into the surface that carries you now. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to try. The night will do all the work. My voice is simply here to guide you gently from one image to another, one thought to another, until the boundary between waking and dreaming blurs and fades. Let's begin by standing at the edge of the Nile at dusk. The water moves in endless calm, reflecting the last colors of the day. Orange, gold, violet fading into the first hints of blue night. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was not just a river. It was life itself. Its seasonal floods gave the soil a gift of fertility, and its steady flow became the calendar of an entire civilization. Imagine the quiet joy of farmers watching the river rise, knowing it meant fields of grain and baskets of bread to come. They measured these changes with something called a nilometer, stone steps carved with markings that turned the moods of the river into numbers, into predictions of plenty or scarcity. This is our first gentle truth tonight. The Nile was Egypt's heartbeat. Not too fast, not too slow, always pulsing with the rhythm of the seasons. Now imagine the soft sound of reeds swaying by the water. Out of those reeds came papyrus, the plant that became the world's first great writing surface. Picture a scribe, sitting cross-legged in the shade, carefully pressing fibers together to form a sheet as smooth as he could make it. With a reed pen dipped in dark ink, he traced the lines of hieroglyphs, little pictures that were more than symbols. They were whispers turned into form, meaning captured in image. Each sign carried not only sound, but also a fragment of the world around it. An owl, a wave, a reed, things familiar to the eyes and heart. Writing was not only communication, it was a way to preserve memory against the sands of time. This is the second truth. Ancient Egypt gave the world one of its earliest doors into written thought, and through those doors, we can still glimpse their voices thousands of years later. Breathe again, slow, gentle. Imagine now the quiet daily life along the riverbanks. A woman grinding grain into flour, the stone turning in rhythm, steady and patient. The scent of bread baking in clay ovens filling the evening air with warmth. Jars of beer, thick and sweet, shared among neighbors as the sun went down. Life was simple but not empty. It was woven with rituals, with cycles that mirrored the river itself. Day by day, season by season, the people of Egypt lived in harmony with the land, giving thanks to the gods for each harvest, each loaf, each sip of water. This is the third truth. Beneath the grandeur of pyramids and temples, Egypt was built by millions of quiet lives, by farmers and bakers, by children and elders, by hands that shaped clay and voices that sang to the fields. The sky above begins to darken now, and stars appear one by one. The Egyptians watched the heavens carefully, tracing the path of constellations, noting the rising of Sirius, the bright star that signaled the flood of the Nile was near. To them, the sky was not just decoration. It was a clock, a calendar, a sacred map. Temples and pyramids were aligned with these celestial patterns, as if to remind everyone that human life was always in dialogue with the eternal. This is the fourth truth. Egypt lived by the stars as much as by the soil. The heavens told them when to sow, when to harvest, when to honor the gods. Now close your eyes for a moment and picture the pyramids at Giza, rising in the dim twilight. Their lines are simple, and yet they hold a mystery that has endured for millennia. Each block, each stone was placed with care, not in haste, not with noise, but with patience stretched across decades. Imagine the steady rhythm of workers pulling ropes, of sleds gliding over sand moistened to ease the burden, of thousands of hands moving as one body. The pyramid was not built in a rush. It was grown like a mountain cultivated by human will. This is the fifth truth. The pyramids remind us that greatness is not a single act, but a slow accumulation. One quiet effort repeated until the impossible becomes real. Let your breath slow again. Notice the heaviness in your eyelids. The facts will continue, one after another like gentle waves, and you can drift with them or let them pass like clouds. There is no need to follow every detail. The rhythm itself will hold you. And before we go further, let me gently remind you, if this calm journey helps you rest, if the quiet facts of ancient Egypt bring you peace tonight, consider giving a simple like to this video, leaving a comment with the fact that soothed you the most, and subscribing so that others searching for rest may also find their way here. These small gestures are like offerings, keeping the light of this channel burning, so that we can continue to travel together through time and silence. Now let us walk deeper into the night of Egypt, where stone meets starlight, and where every grain of sand has a story to tell. Block 2. Life by the river. The night deepens, and yet the Nile continues to flow, a silver ribbon under the stars. Along its banks, life in ancient Egypt unfolded in rhythms so steady they became part of the body itself. Imagine standing on the edge of a field at dawn, the cool mist rising gently, the soil dark and rich after the floodwaters had receded. Farmers bent low, placing seeds into the earth with hands that had learned patience from their fathers and their fathers before them. Each seed was not only food for tomorrow, but also a prayer, a promise to the gods who watched from sky and stone. Grain was the gift most cherished, for it became bread, the very heart of Egyptian life. Picture women kneeling beside grinding stones, their movements slow and steady, the sound of stone against stone filling the morning air with a kind of music. Hours passed this way, the body swaying in rhythm, until flour was ready to be shaped into loaves and baked in clay ovens. The smell of warm bread drifted across villages, mixing with the laughter of children chasing each other in the dust, their bare feet stirring tiny clouds that settled slowly back to the earth. This is the sixth truth. Bread was more than food. It was comfort, stability, a daily reminder that the river and the soil and the gods had once again kept their promise. And where there was bread, there was beer, not the strong drink of taverns in later ages, but a thick, nourishing brew made from barley, sweetened and filling, a drink that was both refreshment and sustenance. Imagine the cool clay jars stored in shaded rooms, the liquid poured into simple cups, shared among family and neighbors as the day drew to a close. To the Egyptians, beer was as essential as water, a companion to work and rest alike. This is the seventh truth. Egypt's people lived not on grand feasts of kings, but on humble loaves and jars of beer that sustained them through long days under the sun. Step into the marketplace now, where voices blend in a low hum, not hurried but constant. Merchants sit beside baskets of onions, garlic, and leeks. Vegetables valued as much for strength as for flavor. Fish pulled from the Nile glisten in the morning light, while dates and figs bring sweetness to the table. Honey, golden and thick, is sold in small pots, treasured like a piece of the sun itself. These were the tastes of Egypt, not extravagant, not wasteful, but grounded in the gifts of earth and water. This is the eighth truth. The table of ancient Egypt was simple, but in its simplicity was abundance, a balance between body and nature. As the day lengthens, imagine workers in the fields, their bodies bronzed by years of labor, their muscles moving in unison as they lift baskets, water channels, and tools. The shaduf, a simple wooden lever with a counterweight, swings back and forth, lifting water from the river to irrigate the crops. Its creaking sound is steady, hypnotic, almost like a chant blending with the calls of birds overhead. Work was hard, but it was also ordered, shared, and deeply connected to the cycle of the Nile. This is the ninth truth. The genius of Egypt was not only in stone monuments, but in the quiet invention of tools and methods that made survival possible in the desert's embrace. And when work was done, when the heat softened and the sky turned gold, festivals brought color and music to the villages. Imagine drums beating softly, flutes sending long, flowing notes into the air, dancers moving in circles as torches flickered. Festivals honored the gods, but they also honored life itself, the gift of harvest, the strength of community, the joy of simply being together beneath the endless sky. Offerings of bread, beer, and flowers were placed before statues of deities, while laughter echoed through the night, reminding everyone that even in the shadow of eternity, there was space for celebration. This is the 10th truth. The Egyptians lived not only for work and survival, but for joy, weaving festivals into the fabric of their days, giving rhythm to existence as naturally as the river gave rhythm to the land. Breathe softly now. Let the images fade into one another. The grinding stone, the clay ovens, the marketplace, the steady swing of the shaduf, the festival fires flickering under the stars. Life in ancient Egypt was not only about pyramids and temples, but about these small moments repeated for generations, each one a thread in the great tapestry of history. And as you drift with these images, you too are part of that rhythm, breathing in, breathing out, resting in the timeless current of life. Block 3, the quiet hands of scribes. The night has grown deeper, the river still murmurs, and now we walk softly into the world of words, a world that gave Egypt a voice that could travel across centuries. Imagine a small room lit only by the glow of an oil lamp, its flame swaying gently with each invisible breath of air. In this room sits a scribe, legs folded beneath him, posture straight, eyes calm. In his hands rests a reed pen, its tip sharpened to a fine point, ready to dip into ink made from soot and water. Before him lies a sheet of papyrus, smooth, pale, and waiting. This is the 11th truth. In Egypt, to be a scribe was to hold power, for through writing came memory, law, and prayer. Picture the careful strokes of his pen. Each line of ink carries not just a sound but an image, a symbol born from the world around him. Falcon, sharp-eyed, represents the god Horus. A ripple of water becomes the sound of life itself. A seated man can mean to sit or to exist. These hieroglyphs are not mere letters. They are pictures of the world, fragments of reality turned into meaning. As he writes, the scribe is not only recording but also weaving the fabric of reality into permanence. This is the 12th truth. Hieroglyphs were not abstract marks but living images, each one a bridge between sound and sight, between the seen and the unseen. Now imagine papyrus, the gift of the river. Stalks of the plant were cut, sliced into thin strips and laid in 2 layers, one vertical, one horizontal. Pressed and dried, they formed a sheet strong enough to hold the weight of history. Papyrus became the canvas on which laws were declared. Prayers were offered, stories were told. It carried contracts, poetry, medical recipes, and sacred texts. From the Nile's reeds came not only rafts and mats, but also the earliest books of the human story. This is the 13th truth. Papyrus transformed fleeting words into lasting voices, preserving Egypt's thoughts for the ages. But the scribe's role was not simply to write. He was also a guardian of knowledge. While many labored in the fields or built monuments under the sun, the scribe worked in the shade, recording taxes, keeping accounts, noting harvests, and copying hymns to the gods. To be trained as a scribe was to step into a path that could lead to temples, to palaces, to positions of respect. It was not only a skill but a destiny carved by education. This is the 14th truth. Literacy was rare, and those who held it stood apart, shaping the administration and religion of Egypt with quiet strokes of ink. In temples, scribes also became priests of words. Imagine a dark chamber deep within stone walls where chants echo softly. A priest scribe unrolls a scroll of papyrus, reading the words that awaken the presence of gods. These were not ordinary words. They were spells, invocations, sacred rhythms believed to have power over life and death. To write was not only to remember but also to command. Hieroglyphs carved into tomb walls were more than decoration. They were protections, guides, and promises for the soul's journey beyond death. This is the 15th truth. Writing in Egypt was sacred, carrying not only human meaning but also divine force. Words believed to act as living beings in the afterlife. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a scroll unrolling endlessly, covered with neat lines of symbols, each one patient, precise. Feel the stillness of the room where the scribe works, the sound of his reed pen scratching softly across the surface, a rhythm so steady it could be mistaken for a heartbeat. Knowledge here is not rushed. It is laid down like bricks in a wall, stone by stone. until a monument of thought stands firm against the erosion of time. And as you drift deeper into this quiet world of ink and reeds, let your mind rest on the thought that every letter you see today, every book you open, carries in it a shadow of these first marks, these first images carved by the hands of scribes thousands of years ago. Block 4, the sky as a clock. Now let us step outside the chambers of ink and papyrus and lift our eyes once more to the night sky. The same sky that mirrored itself in the river Nile. The same dome of stars that for the ancient Egyptians was not simply decoration, but a guide, a teacher, and a clock older than any man-made instrument. Imagine standing on the desert sands after the day's heat has cooled, the horizon stretching flat in every direction, the silence broken only by the sound of wind moving across the dunes. Above you, countless stars shimmer, steady and eternal, their patterns traced and memorized by generations of priests and watchers. This is the 16th truth. For Egypt, the heavens were a calendar, measuring not hours and minutes, but the rhythm of seasons, floods, and destinies. One star in particular ruled the year, the brilliant star Sirius, known to them as Sopdet. Each summer, just before the inundation of the Nile, Sirius would rise in the dawn sky, heralding the flooding of the river and the renewal of the land. The priests watched carefully for this star, for its appearance was not random. It was the signal that life would return, that fields would drink water again, that the cycle of growth would begin anew. From Sirius came the year's first day, a celestial announcement that time itself had been reset. This is the 17th truth. The heliacal rising of Sirius aligned heaven and earth, tying the rhythm of stars to the breath of the river. But it was not only Sirius that mattered. The Egyptians mapped the heavens into groups of stars they called deacons, each rising at a particular time of night, marking the passage of hours. Imagine lying on your back beneath the sky, watching as one deacon sinks below the horizon, while another rises to take its place. This rotation became a celestial clock, measuring time not with ticking hands but with the slow procession of constellations. In temples, these deacons were painted onto ceilings, reminders that even indoors one could look up and see the measure of eternity. This is the 18th truth. The night sky was divided into shifting stations, constellations that served as guardians of hours, guiding the passage of time. Temples themselves became observatories, their axes aligned with stars, solstices, and the great cycles of the heavens. Imagine the Temple of Karnak, its columns vast as a stone forest, its central passageway aligned with the rising of the midwinter sun. On that single day of the year, sunlight would pierce the darkness, flooding the inner sanctuary with golden fire. These alignments were not chance. They were deliberate, anchoring the movement of stars and sun to the heart of stone monuments. This is the 19th truth. Architecture became astronomy in stone, binding the eternal heavens to the earth below. And the sky was not only a clock but also a storybook. To the Egyptians, constellations were gods and symbols, living presences in the firmament. Orion, with its belt of 3 stars, was Osiris, the god of rebirth and eternity. The Milky Way was the celestial Nile, flowing across the heavens as the earthly river flowed across the land. The sun, reborn each morning, was Ra sailing across the sky in his bark of light. At night, Ra vanished into the underworld, only to rise again at dawn. The sky was not distant, it was alive, cycling endlessly with gods, journeys, and struggles. This is the 20th truth. Mythology and astronomy were woven together, so that each star carried both a place in the heavens and a role in divine drama. Close your eyes and let the vision form. A dark sky filled with rivers of stars, each glowing softly, each one placed with intention. Feel the stillness of the desert night, the way the air cools. The sand radiates the last warmth of the sun, and the stars blaze sharper than you have ever seen. Imagine yourself listening as a priest whispers the names of constellations, his voice slow, his tone reverent, as though the stars themselves could hear and respond. And as you drift deeper into this image, let yourself rest in the thought that the heavens above and the earth below were never separate to the Egyptians. They were one great rhythm, a cycle written in both water and fire, both sand and starlight. Block 5, temples as mirrors of the sky. Step slowly now into the silence of the temple courtyards, where shadow and stone stretch endlessly, where the columns rise like forests carved by human hands, and where every angle, every doorway, every line of architecture was a reflection of the cosmos above. Imagine yourself walking barefoot across cool stone, the night wind carrying the scent of incense, the walls around you carved with figures of gods and stars, their surfaces touched by thousands of years of devotion. Here, architecture was not merely shelter. It was a map of the universe, a way of making heaven visible on earth. This is the 21st truth. Temples were built not simply for worship, but as earthly reflections of celestial order, each structure aligned with the heavens. In the Temple of Dendera, ceilings are painted with star maps, constellations arranged in circles, a sky frozen in pigment. In Karnak, the massive axis of the temple aligns with solstices, so that twice a year light pierces deep into the inner chamber, igniting the sanctuary in golden fire. These were not coincidences. The architects studied the stars, listened to the priests, and carved stone to mirror eternity. To stand within these temples was to stand within the universe itself. This is the 22nd truth. Stone was shaped as though it were sky, and the faithful walked not just into halls, but into a living cosmos. Now let your mind wander to the great pyramids of Giza, their sides aligned with cardinal points, their shafts angled toward Orion and the circumpolar stars. These colossal forms were not mere tombs. They were stairways for the soul, roots carved in stone to guide pharaohs into the eternal sky. The shafts that rise from the king's chamber are not decorations. They are tunnels pointing to the stars that never set, the imperishable ones. To the Egyptians, these stars were gateways to immortality. This is the 23rd truth. Pyramids were both tombs and telescopes, guiding rulers beyond death into the eternal stars. Imagine lying now within the cool darkness of a pyramid chamber. The air still, the silence profound. Above you, the passage points straight to Orion, where Osiris reigns eternal. In this silence, stone becomes sky and death becomes a journey, not an end. For Egyptians, to align stone with stars was to ensure that what was mortal could touch eternity. This is the 24th truth. Death was not departure but continuation, a passage written into architecture itself. And now, as you drift within this vision of temples and pyramids, allow yourself to pause for a moment. If these quiet journeys through ancient Egypt help you relax, if they bring you a gentle escape from the noise of the day and carry you toward rest, I invite you kindly to support this space. Leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and consider subscribing to the channel. Each gesture helps others find their way here, one soul after another, into these calm explorations. Together we are building not only a channel, but a community of quiet reflection. This is the 25th truth. Even today, the sharing of stories keeps memory alive. Just as scribes once shared words on papyrus, so too do we share them now across the digital sky. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and feel the weight of stone rise around you, eternal and unmoving. Imagine the columns like trees, the walls like mountains, the stars above mirrored perfectly by the temples below. Feel the unity of earth and sky, and let yourself drift deeper, resting in the thought that architecture, stars, and silence were once one language, written for both gods and men. Block 6. Rituals and the breath of the gods. The temples of Egypt were not silent places of stone as they appear to us today, eroded by centuries of wind and sun. They were once living spaces, vibrating with sound, light, and fragrance, designed to be mirrors of the universe itself. To enter a temple at dawn was to step into the heartbeat of creation, a heartbeat renewed each morning through ritual, through words, through offerings that bound human life to divine order. Imagine yourself in that moment, the sky still faintly dark, a line of pale gold beginning to rise beyond the horizon, the air cool and heavy with the lingering chill of the desert night. The priests awaken before the city, walking in silence toward the sacred gates, their white linen robes glowing faintly in the first breath of morning light. As the doors of the sanctuary open, carved with protective figures and sacred names, the scent of incense begins to rise. Resin gathered from distant lands, gums burned to sweet smoke, powders mixed carefully the night before. All of it bursts into fragrance as fire touches grain. The smoke climbs slowly, curling upward in tendrils, carrying invisible prayers into the vast silence of the sky. In that moment, the temple becomes more than stone. It becomes a channel, a bridge, a breath that moves between earth and heaven. The gods of Egypt were not imagined as distant. They were woven into the very elements of existence. Ra, the sun, sailed each day across the sky and each night through the underworld. Osiris was the fertile soil, the grain that sprouted, the cycle of death and rebirth. Isis was the mother, the healer, the voice of devotion and magic. Thoth was the scribe recording truth in eternal symbols. To the Egyptians, the divine was not beyond the world. It was the world, alive in the river, the desert, the stars, the seasons. When rituals were performed, they were not gestures meant to please absent gods. They were nourishment for the forces that sustained reality. Each morning began with the opening of the mouth ceremony for the statue that represented the god within the sanctuary. The priests entered the inner chamber, lit only by the soft glow of lamps and the shafts of dawn slipping through narrow openings. With gestures repeated over centuries, they washed the statue in water drawn from the Nile, clothed it in fresh linen, anointed it with sacred oils, and placed before it bread, beer, fruits, honey, flowers, and meat. These offerings were believed to sustain the god, to awaken its presence within the material form, and to maintain the order of the cosmos itself. Without them, the world could slide into chaos, the sun might fail to rise, the river might fail to flood, and the balance of life could collapse. In this way, ritual was not optional. It was essential. The Egyptians believed that each dawn was a repetition of the first dawn, when the world was created from the primeval waters of chaos. By reenacting creation daily, they renewed the cosmos. To light incense was to rekindle the first fire. To pour water was to recall the first flood. To speak the sacred words was to echo the voice of the gods at the beginning of time. Time itself was cyclical, and ritual was the turning of that cycle, the assurance that creation continued without faltering. Now picture the sanctuary as the priests move through it in silence, their voices rising in low chants. The chants are not hurried. They flow like the Nile, steady, patient, endless. The sound vibrates in the air, echoing softly against the stone walls, filling the chamber with rhythm. Each word has weight, for words in Egypt were not mere sounds, they were living forces. To name a god was to summon its presence. To recite a spell was to enact its power. Writing and speech were not separate from magic. They were magic. The statue, clothed and anointed, becomes a vessel inhabited by the god's Ka, its living essence. To outsiders, the figure may look like gold or wood, but to the faithful, it is alive, present, listening. When the offerings are laid before it, they are not wasted. The divine presence absorbs their essence, leaving the physical forms to be consumed later by priests or redistributed. This cycle of giving and receiving mirrored the eternal flow of life itself. The god was fed, and in return the god sustained the world. Step back now and imagine the broader rhythm of the day. At dawn, the sun is greeted with hymns as Ra is reborn, rising from the underworld to sail across the sky. At midday, the offerings are renewed to ensure the light does not falter. At dusk, protective words are spoken to guide Ra safely through the night. Each stage of the day corresponds to a ritual, and each ritual is a defense against disorder, against the lurking threat of chaos that Egyptians called Isfet. Order or mat was not permanent. It had to be upheld, guarded, nourished. And rituals were the means by which Ma'at survived. Close your eyes and hear the rhythm. The steady sound of footsteps across stone, the low hum of chants, the hiss of incense as it meets fire, the silence between gestures. Imagine the dim light within the sanctuary, shadows moving across walls carved with figures of gods, scenes of offering, lines of hieroglyphs painted in vibrant colors. The air is heavy, perfumed, filled with a sense of presence. Time slows here. Minutes feel like hours, and hours like eternities. For the Egyptians, to enter a temple was not to step into ordinary time, but into eternal time, the endless repetition of creation. Ritual was not confined to temples alone. In homes, families offered bread and beer to their household gods, to ancestors, to protective spirits who watched over doorways and beds. In fields, farmers poured libations of water to bless the soil before planting. In tombs, offerings were left to nourish the dead who were believed to live on in another world. Rituals surrounded life at every stage, binding human existence to the divine in a web that touched birth, work, marriage, death, and beyond. Even death was ritualized into continuity. Mummification was itself a great ritual, a preservation of the body so that the soul could recognize it and return. Priests recited spells over each stage, purifying the corpse, wrapping it in linen, placing amulets between the layers, painting protective symbols on the surface. These were not mechanical acts. They were prayers made physical, safeguards written in flesh and cloth. The tomb was a house filled with offerings, decorated with scenes of daily life, supplied with objects the dead might need. Through ritual, the deceased stepped into eternity, sustained as surely as the gods themselves. Let your mind rest on this truth. For the Egyptians, ritual was the breath of the gods. Without it, the universe would wither. With it, the sun rose, the river flooded, the crops grew, the dead lived, and the gods themselves remained nourished. Ritual was not illusion, it was reality, the hidden scaffolding of existence. And as you drift deeper into this thought, let the images settle around you like soft linen. Imagine the flicker of lamplight in a dark chamber, the coolness of stone beneath your hand, the fragrance of incense wrapping you like a gentle fog. Feel the rhythm of chants rising and falling, not hurried, not urgent, but patient, eternal, like waves on the shore. In this stillness, you are no longer outside the temple. You are within it. You are part of the ritual, part of the breath that sustains creation. Block 7. The Silent Journey Beyond. To understand ancient Egypt, one must step into its silence. The silence of tombs carved deep into rock, the silence of corridors stretching beneath the desert, the silence of chambers filled with treasures and prayers for eternity. For the Egyptians, death was never an end. It was a doorway, a passage, a continuation of the cycle of life. Just as the sun sank into the horizon only to rise again each dawn, so too did the soul sink into the west, into the shadowed lands, only to awaken renewed in the eternal fields beyond. Death was not darkness. It was transformation. Imagine the body of the departed laid upon a wooden table within a dim chamber, lit only by oil lamps. Priests gather in silence, their linen robes white, their voices low, their movements deliberate. This is the beginning of mummification, a process not of preservation alone, but of sacred preparation. Each step accompanied by prayers, each gesture tied to spells spoken from the ancient Book of the Dead. The corpse is washed with water drawn from the Nile, purified, anointed with fragrant oils. Organs are carefully removed, each one preserved in jars guarded by the 4 sons of Horus. The liver, the lungs, the stomach, the intestines, all placed under divine protection so that they might serve the soul in eternity. The heart, believed to be the seat of memory and conscience, was often left within, for it would be weighed in the afterlife against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. This is the 31st truth. To the Egyptians, the body was not discarded in death. It was transformed into a vessel for eternity, cleansed and guarded by ritual. Now picture the long work of wrapping. Strips of linen, hundreds of meters in length, soaked in resins and oils, are wound carefully around the body, layer upon layer, like time itself folding upon the flesh. Amulets are slipped between the wrappings, a scarab to protect the heart, an eye of Horus to ward off evil, a knot of Isis to ensure protection, a jed pillar to grant stability. Each amulet is not decoration but a spell in physical form, a piece of eternity woven into cloth. The wrapping takes weeks, each bandage laid with precision, each prayer spoken with intention. Slowly, the body becomes a figure of silence, enclosed in linen, guarded by symbols, prepared for the long journey ahead. This is the 32nd truth. Mummification was not merely technique but prayer made visible, a dialogue between body and eternity written in linen and symbol. Once wrapped, the mummy is placed within coffins nested one inside the other, painted with bright colors, inscribed with hieroglyphs. On the surface, scenes of gods and protective spells unfold like a tapestry of magic. The face is painted serene golden, eyes outlined in black, gazing calmly into eternity. The coffins are more than containers. They are guardians, vessels of identity, houses of the soul. To see a coffin is to see not death but continuity, an assurance that the individual would rise again in the fields of the blessed. This is the 33rd truth. Coffins and sarcophagi were not prisons for the dead. They were homes shaped with care, meant to carry the soul beyond time. Now imagine the tomb itself, carved deep into rock or raised in stone. Its walls glow with color, scenes of daily life, of harvests, of banquets, of fishing, of music. Servants painted eternally serve the deceased, carrying baskets, pouring water, preparing bread. Hieroglyphs inscribed along the walls recite spells from the Book of the Dead, guiding the soul past dangers, through gates, across rivers of fire, into halls of judgment. The tomb is not silence alone. It is a house filled with voices, pictures, and prayers. Food and drink are left within. Jars of wine, loaves of bread, baskets of fruit. Furniture, tools, weapons, even games are placed beside the body, as though the dead would rise tomorrow and need them again. This is the 34th truth. The tomb was not a place of farewell, but a house of eternity, stocked with the necessities of life, painted with the joys of earth, charged with the power of spells. And beyond the tomb lay the journey. The soul was believed to pass through many trials, facing gates guarded by spirits, answering questions, reciting truths. At last the soul entered the hall of judgment, where Osiris sat enthroned. There the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was lighter, pure, true, then the soul was declared justified, allowed to pass into the field of reeds, a paradise of abundance where crops grew tall, waters flowed freely, and families were reunited. If the heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by a meat, the devourer, and the soul was lost forever. This is the 35th truth. Death was a test, a weighing of the heart, a balance between truth and falsehood that determined eternity. Close your eyes now and imagine the field of reeds, the Egyptian vision of paradise. Endless fields of golden grain wave in a gentle breeze. The Nile flows calmly, reflecting stars even by day. Families walk together, young and old, reunited beyond death, their hands linked, their voices calm. There is no hunger, no thirst, no toil. All is abundance, peace, eternal rest. This is where the faithful dreamed to arrive, carried by ritual, guided by prayers, guarded by the wrappings of linen and the voices of gods. This is the 36th truth. Paradise in Egypt was not a distant heaven, but a perfected Egypt, a land of eternal harvest, eternal peace. And as you drift with these images, remember, to the Egyptians, death was never an end. It was a mirror of the sun's path, a descent into shadow followed by a return to light. Every tomb, every coffin, every bandage of linen whispered the same promise. As the sun returns, so too will the soul. Let this rhythm carry you now, the rhythm of descent and rising, of silence and awakening, of shadow and dawn. Feel your breath slowing, your body growing heavy, your thoughts dissolving into calm. You are resting now not at the edge of an ending, but at the threshold of continuity, just as the Egyptians believed themselves to be. Block 8. The Book of the Dead and the Words that Guide the Soul. When the Egyptians looked upon death, they did not see only silence, darkness, or the end of memory. They saw a road, winding and mysterious, filled with gates and guardians, challenges and questions, trials that required more than courage. They believed that words themselves, spoken with precision, remembered with faith, written with care, could open doors and dissolve dangers. For this reason, they composed spells, hymns, and instructions collected in what we now call the Book of the Dead. To them, it was not a single book, but a library of pathways, each spell a lantern in the darkness, each hymn a bridge across shadow. Imagine a papyrus scroll unrolled upon a table, the surface smooth, the ink black and red, the lines of hieroglyphs flowing like rivers. Alongside the words are pictures, a man holding his hands in prayer, a goddess spreading her wings in protection, a scale with a heart on one side and a feather on the other. These images are not illustrations. They are spells themselves, visual prayers carrying the same power as the words. The scroll is long, sometimes meters upon meters, rolled carefully and placed within the tomb beside the coffin, so that when the soul awakens in the other world, it will not walk blind. This is the 37th truth. The Book of the Dead was not a book to be read by the living, but a map to be followed by the dead, a companion through eternity. Picture now the journey of the soul, the Ba, a bird with a human head, fluttering free from the body at death, hovering above the tomb, then setting out into the unknown. The spells of the scroll are its guide. One incantation instructs the soul how to speak the right words when confronted by guardians at the gates of the underworld. Another ensures that the soul will not have its heart taken, its shadow stolen, its name forgotten. Yet another gives the words to transform into a falcon, a lotus, a swallow, granting the soul freedom to move through realms as needed. The magic of transformation is woven through the lines, granting strength to pass unharmed where dangers lurk. This is the 38th truth. The Egyptians believed that words themselves were weapons and shields, able to transform the soul and defend it in the afterlife. Among the most important moments described in the Book of the Dead is the weighing of the heart. Imagine the Hall of Two Truths, vast and echoing, lit by eternal lamps. At its center stands a great scale. On one side lies the heart of the deceased, glowing with memory, heavy with deeds. On the other side rests the feather of Mayat, symbol of truth and order. The god Anubis, jackal-headed, watches carefully, his hands steady on the scale. Thoth, ibis-headed, stands nearby with reed pen in hand, ready to record the result. Osiris sits enthroned, green-skinned, wrapped like a mummy, judging silently. The soul waits, trembling as silence thickens. If the heart is lighter, pure, balanced, the soul is declared true of voice and passes onward. If it is heavy, Ammit crouches nearby, the devourer, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, ready to consume the heart and erase the soul forever. This is the 39th truth. The weighing of the heart was the central test of eternity, a moment when truth itself decided the fate of the soul. To aid the soul, amulets were placed within the wrappings of the mummy. Each was chosen with care, for each carried a power of its own. The scarab beetle, carved of green stone, rested upon the heart, engraved with words begging it not to betray the soul during judgment. The eye of Horus, blue and shining, guarded against evil. The Ankh, the symbol of life, whispered eternity. The Djed pillar, representing stability, gave the soul endurance. The knot of Isis, red as blood, offered protection. Each amulet was more than an object. It was a voice, a presence, a spell cast in stone, faience, or gold, resting in silence until needed in the trials beyond. This is the 40th truth. Amulets were prayers in material form, silent companions for the soul's endless journey. Now let your mind wander through the trials described in the spells. The soul moves through rivers of fire, but a recitation cools the flames. Meets serpents of shadow, but words of power bind them. Passes gates where guardians ask riddles, and the correct responses open the way. In each danger, the words of the Book of the Dead act as keys, each phrase unlocking a new passage, each hymn lighting a new torch. Imagine walking through this other world, the walls glowing faintly with hieroglyphs, the path winding deeper into silence, and at every turn the spells unfolding like stars overhead. This is the 41st truth. Knowledge of the right words was as vital as breath itself, for without them the soul could be trapped in darkness. Eventually, for the righteous, the path opens into the field of reeds, the paradise of the Egyptians. Crops grow high, rivers flow calmly, skies remain always blue. Families gather, working in fields that never fail, resting beneath trees that never wither. Here the soul lives as it lived before, but without hunger, without pain, without death. To reach this place is to reach peace, and the journey through ritual, spell, and trial was designed to ensure that peace was possible. This is the 42nd truth. Paradise was not imagined as strange or foreign, but as Egypt perfected, eternal and abundant. And as you drift with this vision, let yourself feel the rhythm of the words. The Egyptians believed that words carried power, that to speak was to act, that to write was to shape reality. Even now, as you hear these stories, as you imagine the soul walking through gates and across fields, you are part of that rhythm. The words settle softly upon you, like linen wrapping, like smoke of incense, like the rising of the sun after night. Let them guide you not to fear but to rest, just as they guided countless souls before, through darkness, into eternity. Block 9. The gods who guard the passage. To walk into the Egyptian vision of death is to walk into the company of gods. Not distant figures gazing from unreachable heights, but presences close, familiar, woven into the fabric of the journey. The underworld, called the Duat, was a realm filled with paths, rivers, mountains, and gates. Each guarded, each ruled, each alive with beings divine and terrifying. To move through it, the soul was never alone. It was always surrounded by eyes that watched, by ears that listened, by hands that weighed and recorded. Death in Egypt was not solitude. It was encounter. At the center of this vision stands Osiris, the Lord of the dead, the green-skinned god wrapped in linen like a mummy, holding the crook and flail, seated upon a throne that rests above flowing waters. To the Egyptians, Osiris was not only ruler of the underworld, he was also the symbol of rebirth. He had died, torn apart by his brother Set, yet was reassembled and revived by the devotion of his wife Isis. Through him, death itself became a cycle, a passage from one form into another. Every grain of wheat that sprouted from soil was a sign of Osiris rising. Every Nile flood was his renewal. Every deceased person who entered the tomb was believed to follow his path, to die and to rise again. This is the 43rd truth. Osiris was the assurance that death was not destruction, but renewal, the seed planted to grow once more. Beside him stands Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian. Black as the fertile soil of the Nile, eyes gleaming with watchfulness. Anubis was the embalmer, the protector of tombs, the one who guided souls through the first steps of the afterlife. He is seen bending over the body of the dead, his hands steady, his gaze protective, ensuring that the wrappings are correct, that the amulets are in place, that the rituals are performed without flaw. In the Hall of Judgment, it is Anubis who weighs the heart, his fingers upon the balance, steady and just. He does not judge, he measures. He is the impartial guardian, ensuring truth is truth, weight is weight. This is the 44th truth. Anubis was not feared, but trusted, the silent companion who guided and measured the soul's passage. Watching carefully in that hall is Thoth, the ibis-headed god, scribe of the gods, master of wisdom and writing. In his hand is the reed pen, in his other a scroll. Every word of judgment is written by him. Every truth spoken, every verdict given he records. To the Egyptians, Thoth was the mind of the cosmos, the one who ensured order through knowledge, through accuracy, through the permanence of words. Without Thoth, memory would vanish, and without memory, eternity could not exist. To see him standing by the scales was to know that nothing would be forgotten, that all would be preserved with fairness. This is the 45th truth. Thoth was the eternal recorder, ensuring that justice was not only done, but remembered forever. Beyond these three, countless guardians filled the Duat. Some were gods of protection, others were terrifying beings set to test the courage and truth of the soul. At gates, fierce guardians demanded the secret names of the gods, and only by reciting them could the soul pass. At rivers, ferrymen demanded offerings, and only with the right spells could the crossing be made. Serpents of fire slithered across the paths, but incantations bound them. Crocodile-headed demons lunged from shadows, but words of power held them back. Each challenge was both danger and test, ensuring that only the pure, the prepared, the true of heart could move forward. This is the 46th truth. The afterlife was not given freely, but guarded, requiring knowledge, purity, and courage to pass. And yet, for those who carried the right words, for those wrapped with the right amulets, for those who had lived by Ma'at, the passage was possible. Imagine the soul walking, holding a staff of light surrounded by shadows, yet never alone. Osiris waits at the end. Isis spreads her wings in welcome. Anubis guides, Thoth records, Horus the falcon clears the path, Hathor the cow goddess offers nourishment, Sekhmet the lioness protects. The gods are not distant. They are companions, guardians, judges, friends. This is the 47th truth. The divine world of Egypt was not apart from humanity. It was the company in which humanity walked, even after death. Now close your eyes and imagine yourself within that hall. You hear the chanting of unseen priests, the steady scratch of Thoth's pen, the soft rustle of Anubis adjusting the scales. You see the glow of Osiris seated in calm judgment, his eyes kind yet unwavering. Around you, the walls shimmer with hieroglyphs glowing faintly like stars. Each one alive, each one whispering power. The silence is deep but not empty. It is filled with presence, with the weight of eternity pressing softly upon your shoulders. This is the 48th truth. In the Egyptian afterlife, silence was never emptiness but fullness, the fullness of God's watching, listening, guiding. And as you rest in this vision, let yourself drift. The gods of Egypt are not calling you to fear, but to peace. They are guardians, not tyrants, companions, not strangers. To the Egyptians, to enter death was to enter the company of powers that had always been near as the sun, as near as the river, as near as breath. Let that thought ease you now as your breath slows, as your eyes grow heavy, as you too walk in the calm presence of guardians who measure only truth and offer only rest to the weary soul. Block 10. Eternity written in stone. When you look at the monuments of Egypt today, silent and immense beneath the sun, you see stone. But to the Egyptians who built them, they were not simply walls or pillars. They were vessels of eternity, words written in stone, memories carved to endure long after the voices of the living had faded. Imagine yourself walking slowly along a temple wall, your fingers brushing the surface of carved hieroglyphs. The grooves are shallow yet precise, each line steady, each curve deliberate. These signs were not made in haste. They were the patient work of artisans who believed they were not merely decorating stone, but inscribing eternity itself. This is the 49th truth. Every wall of Egypt was a page of memory, designed not to crumble with time, but to carry voices beyond death. On the walls of tombs, scenes unfold like living stories. You see a fisherman casting his net, a musician plucking the strings of a harp, a family sitting at a table filled with bread and figs. These are not random decorations. They are promises that in the afterlife the deceased would continue to fish, to sing, to feast. By painting these images, by carving these scenes, the Egyptians ensured that life would not end. It would simply continue in another realm, preserved by art as much as by ritual. This is the 50th truth. Art in Egypt was not illusion, but protection, a way of ensuring that the joys of life could never be taken away. Step into the Valley of the Kings, where tombs stretch deep into the earth, their walls glowing with vibrant colors. Stars are painted on ceilings, gods stride across corridors, spells unfurl across plaster. In one chamber you see Ra merging with Osiris, Sun joining with rebirth. In another you see Anubis guarding the coffin, Thoth recording, Hathor welcoming. The tomb becomes not a grave but a map, guiding the soul step by step through the underworld. Even now, thousands of years later, the colors remain, bright as if the artists had just laid down their brushes, their voices still whispering across time. This is the 51st truth. Tombs were not places of silence, but books of eternity, written not on papyrus, but on the walls of stone themselves. Imagine now the artisans of Deir el-Medina, the village of workers who built the tombs of the kings. Their lives were simple, yet their work carried the weight of eternity. Day after day they chipped stone, mixed pigments, traced lines, filled corridors with stories that would guide pharaohs into the next life. Their hands may be forgotten, but their work remains, a testimony not only to kings, but to the patience of countless unknown men who believed their craft was sacred. This is the 52nd truth. Eternity was not carved by kings alone, but by the hands of countless workers, each stroke of the chisel a prayer in stone. Now pause for a moment. If these quiet journeys through Egypt, these stories of stone and spirit help you rest, if they bring you peace as you drift into sleep, consider giving something back. Simple gesture, a small offering, like those the Egyptians left before their gods. Leave a like on this video, share your thoughts in a comment, subscribe to the channel so that you can return again and again to these calm explorations. Each act, though small, keeps the light burning, keeps the journey alive, ensures that others who seek rest may also find it here. Just as scribes once copied texts to preserve them, so too does your support preserve this space for all who need it. This is the 53rd truth. Memory endures only when it is shared. and your presence here is part of that chain of remembrance. Close your eyes now and feel the weight of stone around you, the coolness of a tomb, the silence of a temple, the shimmer of paint still glowing after thousands of years. Let the thought settle upon you that even in a world of shifting sands and fragile bodies, something endures. Words carved in stone, whispered in ritual, carried in breath endure. And as you rest, so too do these truths rest within you, guiding you gently into silence, into peace, into sleep. Block 11. The music of life and the perfume of eternity. When we think of Egypt, we often see stone, pyramids, temples, statues carved with timeless patience. Yet beneath that stone was life, warm and vibrant, a rhythm of days and nights filled with sound, with movement, with fragrance. The Egyptians did not live only in silence. They lived surrounded by music, by dance, by scents carried on the air, by the small joys of taste and touch. To walk into their world is to awaken not only the mind but the senses, to feel what they felt, to hear what they heard, to breathe the same air fragrant with oil and spice. Imagine a courtyard at dusk, the air cooling after a day of heat. A musician sits cross-legged with a harp upon his knees. His fingers pluck strings slowly, the sound soft like ripples across still water. Beside him another taps gently on a drum, the rhythm steady, low, grounding. Voices rise, not loud, not hurried, but calm, chanting words of devotion or simple songs of love. The music fills the space, rising toward the stars, carrying with it the weight of centuries. Music was not entertainment alone. It was prayer, healing, connection. It accompanied birth, labor, festivals, funerals. It moved with the body through every stage of life. This is the 54th truth. Music in Egypt was the thread binding human hearts to one another and to the divine, woven into every ritual, every celebration, every sorrow. Now see the dancers. Women move in circles, their linen garments flowing, their hair braided with beads that click softly as they turn. Their arms extend gracefully, their feet light against the ground, their movements echoing the rhythm of the drum. The dance is not only joy, it is offering. Each step is devotion, each gesture a prayer. Sometimes dancers performed before the statues of gods, their bodies speaking when words were not enough. Sometimes they danced in banquets, their presence a reminder that beauty and devotion were intertwined. This is the 55th truth. Dance in Egypt was a form of prayer made with the body, a language of devotion written in movement. Perfume filled the air as much as music. The Egyptians loved fragrance not as luxury, but as necessity. They burned incense to purify spaces, anointed their bodies with oils, perfumed their hair with cones of wax that melted slowly in the heat, releasing sweet aromas. Imagine the scent of lotus, sacred and calming, drifting across a banquet. Picture priests carrying censers, the smoke rising in the temple, thick and heavy, filling lungs and walls with invisible blessing. Perfume was not vanity. It was purity, health, protection. To smell fragrance was to touch the divine. This is the 56th truth. Fragrance was the breath of holiness, the invisible veil linking body and spirit, earth and heaven. Step now into a banquet hall lit by oil lamps. Guests recline on cushions, women and men alike, drinking wine, eating figs, dates, honey cakes. Servants move quietly, pouring cool water, offering roasted duck, bringing more bread still warm from ovens. Harpists play, dancers turn. The scent of incense hangs in the air. On this night, the living gather to celebrate the gift of life, knowing it is fleeting, knowing it must be savored. Joy and devotion are not separate. They are the same. To eat, to drink, to listen, to laugh. These were as sacred as offerings in the temple. This is the 57th truth. The Egyptians believed that joy itself was holy, a mirror of abundance, a taste of eternity brought into the present moment. Even in daily work, music and fragrance softened the hours. A farmer plowed to the rhythm of a flute. A woman ground grain humming softly. A fisherman sang as he pulled nets from the Nile. The rhythms of life became the rhythms of music. Even silence was filled with sound. The rustle of palm leaves, the splash of water, the murmur of wind through reeds. Egypt was alive with song, with fragrance, with motion, with devotion in every breath. This is the 58th truth. To live in Egypt was to live in rhythm, to let daily life become a slow hymn to the gods and to the land. Now close your eyes and imagine it all at once. The harp, the drum, the dancers, the fragrance of lotus and myrrh, the taste of bread and wine, the glow of lamps, the laughter of friends, the presence of gods watching quietly through it all. Let the images blend into a single vision, life not as fragments but as harmony. This harmony was Egypt's greatest gift. Not pyramids, not temples, not gold, but the balance of joy and devotion, work and celebration, silence and song. This is the 59th truth. Harmony was the secret of Egypt, the music beneath stone, the fragrance beneath silence, the rhythm beneath eternity. And as you drift with these sounds and scents, let yourself rest. Feel the harp's strings echo softly within your chest, the incense wrapping you like linen, the movement of dancers swaying your thoughts into calm. Egypt whispers not only through stone but through senses, inviting you to close your eyes, to breathe deeply, to let go, and to fall gently into sleep. Block 12. Clothing, jewels, and the beauty of the sacred body. If you close your eyes and picture the people of Egypt, do not imagine them only as figures carved in stone or painted on walls. Imagine them as they truly were. Men and women clothed in linen that flowed like light across their skin, adorned with jewels that caught the sun, perfumed with oils, their bodies cared for as vessels of both life and devotion. In Egypt, appearance was never vanity. It was ritual, an expression of harmony, of ma'at, the order that kept the universe balanced. The body was a temple, and beauty was a prayer. Linen was the fabric of Egypt, woven from the flax that grew along the Nile's fertile banks. Picture workers in fields harvesting the slender stalks, stripping fibers, spinning them into thread, weaving them into cloth. The result was light, cool, perfect for the heat of the desert sun. The garments were simple but not crude. Men wore kilts wrapped around the waist. Women wore long gowns with straps over the shoulders. Linen clung softly, revealing the form, flowing with the body's movements. For the wealthy, the fabric was sheer, almost translucent, layered for elegance. For the poor, it was coarser but still clean, still sacred. To wear linen was to wear purity. For the priests bathed often, shaved their bodies, and clothed themselves in spotless white linen to serve the gods. This is the 60th truth. Linen was not only clothing but symbol, a fabric of purity that wrapped both priest and farmer in the same sacred rhythm. Adornments completed the body's prayer. Imagine collars wide as the chest, made of rows of beads in turquoise, lapis lazuli, carnelian, gold. Earrings glinted in the sun. Bracelets jingled softly with each movement of the hand. Anklets chimed as feet crossed stone floors. Jewelry was not decoration alone. It was protection, charged with magic, carved with symbols, inscribed with names. A scarab worn at the throat guarded the heart. An eye of Horus set in gold watched over the wearer. Gold itself was not mere wealth, but the flesh of the gods, eternal, untarnished, glowing. To wear gold was to carry eternity upon the skin. This is the 61st truth. Jewelry was both ornament and spell, both beauty and protection, a shield of light against the shadows of life. Cosmetics too were sacred. Picture a woman seated before a polished copper mirror, grinding malachite into green powder, galena into black coal. With a slender stick, she traces lines around her eyes, long and graceful, darkening the gaze, making it sharp, protective. The coal was not vanity. It shielded against the sun's glare, kept insects away, and symbolized the eye of Horus, the eye that saw and guarded. Men and women alike painted their eyes, not for seduction alone, but for health, for magic, for reverence. This is the 62nd truth. Cosmetics were medicine and magic, protection and devotion, not separate from daily life, but essential to it. Perfumed oils softened the skin, scented the hair, soothed the body after the day's labor. Cones of scented wax were placed upon heads during banquets, melting slowly in the heat, releasing fragrance hour by hour. The body was bathed often, for cleanliness was sacred, part of health, part of ritual. To be clean was to be pure, and purity was necessary to stand before gods and men alike. Priests shaved their heads and bodies, removing all hair, for no impurity could approach the divine. To bathe, to anoint, to perfume, these were daily prayers written not in words but in the body itself. This is the 63rd truth. Hygiene was not habit alone, but devotion, a sign that the body was a vessel of sacred order. Now picture a procession in honor of a god. Priests walk in spotless linen, their skin shining with oil, their eyes rimmed with kohl, their collars of beads catching the sunlight. Behind them, singers and dancers move, their garments flowing, their hair braided, their wrists heavy with bracelets that chime softly. The scent of incense floats above them, lotus flowers crown their heads, and the entire procession becomes not only a ritual, but a vision of harmony. Beauty here is not separate from holiness. It is holiness. This is the 64th truth. Beauty in Egypt was sacred order made visible. Harmony embodied in linen, gold, and fragrance. Step back into daily life. Imagine a child running through the courtyard, a necklace of faience beads bouncing against the chest, laughter echoing. Picture a farmer at dusk, rinsing his body in the Nile, slipping a simple amulet around his neck before sleep. Envision a queen reclining on cushions, her fingers heavy with rings, her body perfumed with lotus oil, her eyes painted wide and watchful. Each of these is Egypt, not one apart from the other. The humble and the noble, the poor and the rich, all carried the same rhythm of care for the body, the same belief that to be clothed, adorned, perfumed, was to live in harmony with gods and earth. This is the 65th truth. The sacred body was not privilege alone, but a shared devotion, lived in palaces and huts alike, each gesture of care an echo of the divine. And as you drift with these images, let yourself feel the fabric of linen against your skin, light and cool. Let yourself see the glimmer of gold, hear the soft chime of beads, breathe the fragrance of lotus and myrrh. These are not luxuries, they are lullabies for the senses, the daily hymns of life lived in balance. Egypt speaks not only through stone and ritual, but through touch, through scent, through sound, through beauty itself. And as you rest, so too does the world rest upon you, wrapping you in linen, crowning you in gold, anointing you in fragrance, guiding you softly towards sleep. Block 13, the path of learning in the silent schools of Egypt. Knowledge in Egypt was not scattered like grains upon the sand. It was gathered carefully, preserved in temples, passed from one hand to another with patience like water poured slowly from a vessel into another. To be a scribe was to step into this flow, to receive what had been guarded for centuries, and to promise that it would be carried forward into centuries yet to come. Education was not for all, but for those chosen or born into the path, and once chosen, their lives were bound to the art of writing, to the weight of words, to the sacred task of keeping the rhythm of the world recorded. Imagine a boy, young, perhaps 10 years old, seated upon the ground with a shard of broken pottery in his lap. In his hand is a reed pen, dipped into ink made from soot and water. He copies lines written by his teacher again and again, the same phrases repeated until his wrist aches and his back stiffens. His teacher, a stern scribe, walks behind him, correcting, demanding precision. The words he copies are not random. They are maxims, proverbs, instructions on how to live in harmony with Ma'at, the order of truth. Do not be arrogant because of your knowledge. Speak with the ignorant as with the wise. The heart of a man is his guide. These lessons are both practice for the hand and nourishment for the mind. This is the 66th truth. Education in Egypt was not only about letters, it was about shaping character, teaching truth, guiding the soul as well as the hand. The schools were often attached to temples or palaces. The children of officials and priests gathered there, seated in rows, copying on wooden boards or scraps of papyrus when they were fortunate. They learned to trace hieroglyphs, to write in hieratic, the faster script used for daily work, to calculate with numbers, to measure with geometry, to read hymns and contracts. The discipline was strict. Mistakes were met with stern correction, sometimes with blows, for knowledge was considered too sacred to be treated with carelessness. Yet those who endured found themselves rising into a life of influence, their ink carrying them where weapons could not. This is the 67th truth. The pen in Egypt was a ladder, lifting the diligent into positions of power and respect. Imagine the apprentice growing older, his lines steadier, his symbols precise. He is sent to assist a temple scribe, copying accounts of grain, recording lists of offerings, noting the cycles of the Nile. His hand moves quickly, his mind sharp. He learns not only from books but from work, standing in granaries counting sacks, watching priests recite hymns, entering tombs to inscribe walls. His education is the living world itself carried into ink. This is the 68th truth. Knowledge in Egypt was practical as well as sacred, tied to bread and river as much as to gods and stars. At times, scribes copied entire texts to preserve them. Imagine a quiet chamber, shelves lined with rolls of papyrus, the smell of ink and resin in the air. By lamplight, a scribe bends over his work, carefully reproducing hymns, stories, spells. In this way, texts lived on, not as static objects, but as living voices, recopied, re-inked, passed forward. Without this patience, memory would have vanished into sand. Because of it, we hear their voices even now. This is the 69th truth. Eternity in Egypt was not only carved in stone, but written in ink, preserved through endless copying by steady hands. Knowledge extended beyond writing. Medicine, astronomy, mathematics, all were studied with seriousness. Physicians memorized lists of herbs, of treatments, of prayers that healed. Astronomers observed the stars, recording their risings, predicting floods. Builders measured stone, calculated angles, planned monuments that still stand after millennia. All of this knowledge was guarded by scribes, written on papyrus, stored in temple libraries. The wisdom of Egypt was vast, but it was also fragile. For papyrus can burn, can decay, can vanish. Only through endless repetition did it survive. This is the 70th truth. The wisdom of Egypt was strong, but its survival depended on devotion, on the endless patience of those who copied and remembered. Now close your eyes and imagine sitting among those apprentices, your knees aching, your reed pen in hand, the lines before you shimmering in lamplight. Hear the scratching of many pens at once, the voice of the teacher reciting, the sighs of students struggling, the quiet determination that fills the room. Feel the discipline of knowledge, the weight of words, the sense that what you write is not only for yourself but for eternity. In this silence, you are part of the same chain, the same rhythm, the same unbroken river of memory flowing through millennia. This is the 71st truth. To learn in Egypt was to step into eternity, to join the endless current of voices that carried the order of the world upon their ink. And as you drift with these images, let them soften within you. Feel the stillness of the school chamber, the warmth of the lamp, the patience of the pen moving steadily. Knowledge does not rush. It flows, it settles, it endures. So too does your breath now, slow, steady, enduring. Let the rhythm carry you deeper into rest, as Egypt once carried its wisdom deeper into time. Block 14. The Healing Hands of Egypt. Health in Egypt was not left to chance. It was guarded, studied, woven into both science and prayer, treated as part of the order of Ma'at, the sacred balance that held the cosmos together. To heal was to restore balance, to correct what had slipped into disorder, to bring the body back into harmony with the river, the soil, the gods, and the stars. The physicians of Egypt were not mere practitioners of remedies. They were keepers of wisdom, men and women who read the signs of illness in the body, as priests read the signs of stars in the heavens. Their work was slow, deliberate, filled with ritual as much as with knowledge, and in this slowness lay its strength. Imagine a physician seated in a quiet room, papyrus scrolls unrolled before him, the surface covered with lines of ink listing treatments, recipes, instructions. The Aber's papyrus, vast and detailed, describes hundreds of remedies. Honey mixed with herbs to soothe wounds, garlic for the heart, figs for digestion, castor oil for cleansing, willow for pain. Each remedy is written not as suggestion, but as tradition, words copied and preserved for generations. The physician runs his finger down the lines, choosing carefully, mixing slowly, grinding plants in stone mortars, boiling, straining, whispering prayers as he works. For him, the boundary between medicine and magic is not sharp. Both are tools. Both are necessary. This is the 72nd truth. Egyptian medicine was a union of knowledge and ritual, of herbs and prayers, of science and magic woven together. Picture now a healer preparing a wound. The patient lies still as honey is spread gently across the cut. Honey, known for its power to prevent infection, glistens in the lamplight. Over it, a bandage of linen is laid, soft and clean. A prayer is spoken quietly, calling upon Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing and fury, asking her to turn her wrath into protection. The wound is covered, the body rests, the healer waits. For Egyptians, no act of medicine was complete without invocation. The gods and the herbs worked together, two sides of one truth. This is the 73rd truth. To heal was to call upon both the earth and the divine, blending remedy and prayer into one act. Some physicians specialized. There were doctors for the eyes, for the stomach, for the teeth. There were those who treated soldiers, binding fractures, setting bones, applying splints of wood and linen. There were women who cared for childbirth, skilled in easing pain, guiding new life into the world. Medicine was a calling, but it was also an art of focus. Each part of the body was studied with devotion, and each healer held fragments of knowledge that, together, formed a body of wisdom as vast as the Nile itself. This is the 74th truth. Medicine in Egypt was specialized, a network of healers each devoted to a part of the whole body of knowledge. And yet, for all their remedies, for all their skills, the Egyptians knew that not all illnesses were of flesh alone. Some were of spirit, of shadow, of forces unseen. For these, spells were spoken, amulets hung, rituals performed. Fever might be treated with herbs, but also with words written on papyrus folded and worn against the skin. A cough might be soothed with honey, but also with prayers whispered into water before drinking. The line between body and soul was not divided. Healing touched both. This is the 75th truth. Illness in Egypt was seen as both physical and spiritual, and healing required attention to both realms. Imagine now the embalmer, who was also a kind of healer, working not for the living but for the dead. His hands knew the body's secrets, its organs, its veins, its tissues. Through mummification, he preserved the body not as a corpse, but as a vessel prepared for eternity. In this way, the knowledge of anatomy, of preservation, of the body's hidden structures was carried forward, deepening the understanding of flesh. The embalmer was as much a physician as the healer in the home, his work another form of medicine, directed toward the soul's journey rather than earthly survival. This is the 76th truth. Even in death, the healer's hand was present, preserving the vessel so that life could continue in eternity. Now picture a temple dedicated to Imhotep, the great architect, once a man, later revered as a god of healing. Pilgrims come carrying offerings, seeking cures. They sleep within the temple, hoping for dreams that will reveal remedies, for visions that will show which herbs to take, which rituals to perform. Healing was not always in the physician's hand. Sometimes it was in the dream, in the whisper of the divine during the stillness of night. This is the 77th truth. Healing in Egypt was not only physical but visionary, sometimes arriving in dreams sent by the gods. Close your eyes and breathe softly. Feel the scent of herbs ground to powder, the coolness of honey on the skin, the warmth of oil rubbed gently into the body, the sound of whispered prayers echoing in chambers lit by flame. Healing is not hurried. It is slow, patient, unfolding like the Nile itself, steady and calm. As you rest now, imagine yourself lying upon a bed in Egypt, the healer's hand upon your brow, the sound of chanting low, the fragrance of incense in the air, the sense that body and spirit are both being tended, soothed, renewed. This is the 78th truth. Healing is rest and rest is healing, and in this rhythm the Egyptians touched eternity. Block 15. The stones that touch the sky. Architecture in Egypt was never mere construction. It was not about shelter, nor about walls to keep the desert wind at bay. It was about eternity. Every stone raised, every pillar carved, every axis aligned to the rising sun or the setting star was a statement that life did not end, that order persisted, that the divine was not distant but rooted in earth. The builders of Egypt were not only masons or laborers, they were participants in ritual, carving the body of the gods into stone, giving form to what was eternal through weight, geometry, and balance. Picture a pyramid, not as the cold geometry we see today, but as a living mountain of light, its limestone casing polished to shine in the desert sun, a radiant beacon visible for miles across the Nile Valley. Imagine the workers arriving at dawn, thousands of them, their sandals crunching against the sand, their bodies moving in rhythm as they pull sledges, roll logs, lift blocks. The sound of hammers echoes, copper chisels strike stone, ropes creak as men lean forward, heaving in unison. It is not chaos, it is order, a slow and steady movement that lasts not for days but for decades. This is the 79th truth. Every stone in a pyramid was a prayer, every block a verse in a hymn to eternity. The Egyptians aligned their monuments with precision. The Great Pyramid of Giza, vast and silent, is aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal points. Its base is level within fractions of an inch. Its sides rise with a slope that mirrors cosmic proportions. To achieve this, surveyors studied the stars, marking the movement of Orion's belt, tracing the shadow cast by the sun at noon, using water-filled trenches to level the ground. Nothing was accidental. Architecture was astronomy solidified, the heavens drawn down into stone. This is the 80th truth. Egyptian architecture was not only about stone. It was about the sky, the stars, the cosmic order translated into geometry. Imagine walking into a temple at dawn. The rising sun floods the entryway, casting its light down a long corridor that leads to a shrine at the farthest end. The alignment is deliberate, designed so that on one day of the year, the sun itself touches the statue of the god, illuminating it in fire. To the Egyptians, this was not symbolic. It was real. The god received the touch of Ra's light, and the people witnessed the union of earth and sky. This is the 81st truth. Temples were built not only as houses for gods, but as instruments of alignment, binding time and eternity together. The labor of building was immense, yet it was not forced in the way later myths often suggest. Archaeological evidence shows that the workers of Giza lived in organized villages, fed with bread and beer, provided with medical care, buried with respect. They were not slaves dragged in chains, but skilled laborers, artisans, and farmers working in the season when the Nile flooded their fields. They built not only for a pharaoh but for themselves, for their place in eternity, for the order that bound them to their land and their gods. This is the 82nd truth. The pyramids were built not by slaves but by communities, by people who saw in stone the mirror of their own eternity. Now let us move slowly through a hypostyle hall, its roof held by a forest of stone columns carved with lotus and papyrus capitals. The air is cool, the light dim, filtering down through small openings high above. Every column is painted, covered in hieroglyphs, scenes of gods, pharaohs, offerings, battles, and prayers. The visitor walks in shadow, dwarfed by the towering stone, reminded of their own smallness beneath the weight of eternity. The hall is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to transform, to make the mortal feel the immensity of the divine. This is the 83rd truth. Egyptian architecture dwarfed the human body to elevate the soul, to remind the living of the scale of eternity. And beyond temples and pyramids, there were tombs carved deep into the rock of cliffs, hidden in valleys where silence was thick. The Valley of the Kings, with its long corridors painted with stars, gods, and texts, was not simply a burial ground. It was a map of the cosmos, a journey carved into stone. The walls glowed with color, telling the story of Ra's nightly voyage through the underworld, the battles with chaos, the renewal at dawn. For the dead, these walls were guides, words, and images that became spells, helping the soul cross from darkness to light. This is the 84th truth. Tombs were not graves. They were corridors of transformation, carved to carry the soul into eternity. Architecture extended even to small things, amulets shaped as houses for gods, shrines small enough to carry, models of granaries and boats placed in tombs to serve the dead in the afterlife. Every form of construction, great or small, was infused with purpose. A clay figurine, a mud brick wall, a monumental pylon, all were built with the same intention: to make the invisible visible, to bind heaven and earth. This is the 85th truth. In Egypt, architecture was everywhere, from the colossal pyramid to the smallest amulet, all carrying the weight of eternity. Close your eyes now and imagine the sound of stone being placed upon stone, the deep thud as it settles, the quiet breath of workers pausing, the endless repetition of labor stretched across years. The pyramid rises slowly, one block at a time, until its shadow falls across the desert. To us it is silent, a relic. To them it was alive, a mountain that breathed eternity. Even now, as we look upon the ruins, the broken temples, the collapsed tombs, we feel something lingering, something heavy and still, as if the stone itself remembers. This is the 86th truth. Egyptian architecture is not dead. It breathes still, carrying memory across the silence of centuries. Block 16, the daily rhythm of the Nile. Life in ancient Egypt unfolded not in haste but in rhythm. A rhythm guided by the Nile, by the rising and setting of the sun, by the turning of the seasons, by the eternal contrast of desert and fertile valley. Each day was not simply a passage of time. It was a small cycle within greater cycles, a rhythm of breath within the endless breathing of the cosmos. To live in Egypt was to live attuned to balance, to order, to the invisible thread of Ma'at that bound heaven and earth. Picture the morning in a village on the Nile's edge. The first light touches the water, casting silver ripples across the surface. A fisherman pushes his small boat out, his oar dipping softly, breaking the reflection of the dawn. On the shore, women grind grain with heavy stones, their hands moving in steady repetition, the sound of stone against stone echoing like a heartbeat. Children run barefoot through the dust, their laughter mixing with the calls of birds rising from the reeds. It is simple, it is quiet, it is eternal. This is the 87th truth. Daily life in Egypt was measured not by clocks but by cycles, by the rising of the sun, the flooding of the river, the endless return of balance. Food was both necessity and ritual. Bread and beer formed the foundation, baked from the wheat and barley grown in the black soil, renewed each year by the flood. The bread was coarse, filled with grains, sometimes sweetened with figs or dates, sometimes flavored with herbs. Beer was thick, more like a nourishing meal than a drink, and it was consumed by all, and workers in the fields, priests in the temples, even children. Around this foundation, fruits, vegetables, fish, and sometimes meat were added. Honey was precious, a sweet treasure stored carefully, a taste of the divine. Garlic and onions, strong and pungent, were valued for strength. To eat was not only to nourish the body, but to join with the gifts of the Nile, to participate in the river's eternal generosity. This is the 88th truth. Bread and beer were more than food. They were the heartbeat of Egyptian life, sustenance shared by every hand, every home. Clothing was simple, practical, and yet graceful. Linen, woven from flax grown along the river, was light and cool, perfect for the desert heat. Men wore kilts or simple tunics. Women wore long dresses, often pleated, sometimes held with beads or ties. Children ran mostly unclothed until they grew, their bodies warmed by the sun, their laughter filling the air. Jewelry, however, was everywhere. Necklaces of faience beads, amulets shaped like ankhs, scarabs, or eyes of protection, bracelets of copper or gold, rings carved with symbols of eternity. For the Egyptians, jewelry was not mere ornament. It was protection, a way to carry the gods close to the body. This is the 89th truth. Clothing was simplicity, but jewelry was eternity, a constant reminder that beauty and protection walked hand in hand. Work was steady, shaped by the river's cycle. When the Nile flooded, fields were underwater and farmers turned to other labor, building canals, raising temples, quarrying stone. When the waters receded, the soil was rich and seeds were planted, carefully tended, harvested with sickles of flint. Work was not seen as punishment. It was duty, contribution, participation in the balance that kept society alive. Scribes bent over papyrus scrolls, their reed pens dipping in ink, recording accounts, prayers, and decrees. Artisans carved stone and wood, painted walls with images of gods and daily life alike. Musicians plucked harps and struck sistrums, their sounds filling both banquet halls and temple courts. Every role, from the humblest laborer to the most skilled scribe, was part of the same fabric. This is the 90th truth. Work in Egypt was not isolated. It was a thread woven into the great tapestry of order, each task sustaining both society and cosmos. And there were times of joy, times of celebration, when the steady rhythm burst into music, dance, and laughter. Festivals filled the calendar, honoring gods, marking the turning of seasons, celebrating harvests and victories. During these festivals, the statues of gods were carried from temples, paraded through streets, their presence shared with the people. Music filled the air. Flutes, drums, harps, rattles. Voices lifted in song, feet moving in rhythm, hands clapping to the beat. Beer flowed, bread was shared, families gathered. For a time, the line between sacred and ordinary dissolved, and the whole community joined in joy. This is the 91st truth. Festivals were more than celebration. They were renewal, moments when the people and the gods met in shared joy. Picture now a quiet evening. The sun sets beyond the desert. The sky glows with fire, then dims to violet and black. Families gather in courtyards, sharing food, telling stories. Children fall asleep to the sound of voices, to the scent of bread cooling, to the hush of the river. Lamps flicker, casting shadows on mud brick walls. Somewhere a scribe continues to write, his pen scratching softly. Somewhere a musician plucks a harp, the notes drifting into the night. Life slows and the rhythm of rest begins. This is the 92nd truth. In Egypt, life and rest were not separate. They flowed together, the day itself a cycle of work, joy, and renewal. And even in the simplest acts, baking bread, weaving linen, plucking a harp, pouring beer, there was a quiet sense of the sacred. Every action, no matter how ordinary, echoed the order of the cosmos. To live was to participate in eternity, to carry within each gesture the reflection of the gods. This is the 93rd truth. In Egypt, daily life itself was sacred, every gesture a mirror of the eternal balance. Close your eyes now. Hear the sound of the river lapping against the shore. Smell the bread baking, the beer brewing, the incense burning faintly in the distance. Feel the linen against your skin, the beads around your neck, the sand under your feet. Life is not hurried here. It is steady, flowing, balanced. And as you rest, you carry with you not only the stories of kings and gods, but the lives of ordinary men, women, and children who found eternity in their daily rhythm. This is the 94th truth. Eternity was not only in temples and tombs, but in homes, in meals, in laughter, in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. Block 17. Colors, sounds, and symbols of eternity. Art in Egypt was never decoration. It was never created to fill empty space or to delight the eyes alone. Every line carved into stone, every color brushed onto plaster, every statue shaped from wood or granite was an act of invocation, a way to bind the eternal to the fleeting, to anchor divine presence into the daily life of the people. Egyptian art was not meant to change, not meant to evolve with fashion, not meant to express the whims of the artist. It was continuity, stability, a mirror of Ma'at, the eternal order. This is the 95th truth. Egyptian art was permanence, not innovation, created to hold the eternal still. Colors carried power. Red was not only pigment, it was life, energy, and sometimes danger. Black was not death, but fertility, the color of the rich soil left by the Nile, the promise of rebirth. Blue was the sky, the water, the infinite canopy that sheltered life. Green was growth, renewal, the eternal cycle of plants and crops. Gold was not paint but radiance itself, the flesh of the gods, the metal that did not tarnish, the eternal sun captured in metal. White was purity, ritual cleanliness, the clothing of priests and the casing of pyramids that once shone against the desert like captured light. Each color was chosen with care, for to use a color was to invoke its essence, to call forth its spirit. This is the 96th truth. Color in Egypt was not visual but spiritual, each shade a fragment of the cosmos. Now imagine stepping into a tomb, the walls alive with images. Figures stand in profile, their faces sharp, their eyes wide, their bodies turned in poses that seem both rigid and graceful. They are painted not to look realistic but to embody essence. The farmer shown with his plow is every farmer. The wife shown with her children is every mother. The pharaoh shown before the gods is not one man but the eternal king, the eternal order made flesh. These images were not portraits. They were spells, designed to ensure that what was shown would be true in eternity. This is the 97th truth. Images in Egypt were not reflections of the past but guarantees of the future. Sculpture too was sacred. A statue of a god or of the dead was not inert. It was a vessel, a dwelling place for spirit. Priests performed rituals to open the mouth of statues, to allow them to breathe, to speak, to live. The eyes were carved wide, the lips parted, the body seated with calm strength. To us, the stillness seems lifeless. To them, the stillness was power, a place where eternity could rest. Even statues of animals, cats, falcons, crocodiles, and bulls carried divinity, embodiments of gods, guardians of temples, protectors of homes. This is the 98th truth. Statues were not objects. They were presences, resting places of the eternal. Music, too, was never mere entertainment. The plucking of a harp, the beating of a drum, the shaking of a sistrum were all acts of invocation. In temples, music summoned the gods, soothed them, and honored them. In homes, it lifted spirits, comforted children, accompanied work. In festivals, it was joy, uniting the community in shared rhythm. Instruments were simple but profound. Flutes of reed, harps of wood, rattles of bronze, drums of skin stretched taut. Women often served as musicians in temples, their voices carrying prayers like wings of sound. This is the 99th truth. Music in Egypt was both joy and invocation, a sound offered to gods and people alike. Beneath all of it, the art, the music, the statues, the colors, lay symbolism, layers upon layers of meaning. The scarab beetle, rolling its ball of dung across the sand, became Khepri, the god who rolled the sun across the sky each day. The lotus flower, opening at dawn and closing at dusk, became the cycle of rebirth. The falcon's sharp eyes and soaring flight became Horus, the sky itself. The Ankh, shaped like a looped cross, was life eternal, carried in the hands of gods, given to the lips of pharaohs as breath of immortality. Even the simplest line in a carving carried meaning, each gesture a symbol, each form a whisper of truth. This is the 100th truth. Symbolism was the language of Egypt, a language written not in words but in images, sounds, and forms. Imagine now a great festival. The statue of a god is carried out of its temple, its face veiled, its body adorned in linen and gold. Priests walk in procession, musicians play, people sing. Flowers are thrown into the air, the scent of incense rises like smoke from 1,000 homes. The god is not absent but present, moving among the people, blessing them, receiving their offerings. The art carved on temple walls comes alive in reality. The music heard in courtyards fills the streets. The symbols painted in tombs breathe in the open air. The sacred and the ordinary meet, joined in rhythm, in color, in sound. This is the 101st truth. Art, music, and symbol were not separate from life. They were life, woven into every celebration, every prayer, every home. And as the night falls, as lamps flicker in temples, as musicians rest, as colors fade into shadow, the sense remains. Egypt itself was a living artwork, a living song, a living symbol. Eternal, balanced, radiant. This is the 102nd truth. Egypt itself was art, a harmony of color, sound, and form that carried eternity within it. Close your eyes. Imagine the slow rhythm of a harp plucked gently, the shimmer of gold catching torchlight, the scent of incense curling upward. Imagine the sound of voices chanting, the sight of painted walls glowing in lamplight, the feel of cool stone under your fingertips. You are surrounded by art, by music, by symbol. You are not outside eternity. You are inside it. This is the 103rd truth. Art was not for the eyes alone. Music not for the ears alone. Symbols not for the mind alone. They were for the soul, to soothe, to guide, to hold gently in the eternal rhythm. Block 18, the eternal river of time for the Egyptians. Time was never a straight line disappearing into distance. It was a circle, a rhythm, a river that flowed and returned. To live in Egypt was to live inside cycles. The rising of the sun each dawn, the falling of the sun each dusk, the flooding of the Nile, the retreat of its waters, the endless turning of stars. They believed not in endings, but in returns, in the quiet certainty that what departs will always come again. This is the 92nd truth. In Egypt, time itself was a circle, and to live within it was to rest inside eternity. Each dawn was the rebirth of Ra, sailing his golden bark across the sky. Each dusk was not death but descent, a passage through the underworld, a preparation for rising once more. Day and night were breaths of the cosmos, inhalation and exhalation, eternal rhythm. This is the 93rd truth. Every sunrise was rebirth. every sunset a promise of return. The Nile too measured eternity, its floods covered fields, but when the waters receded, they left fertile soil rich with life. Out of seeming destruction came renewal. Year after year the cycle repeated, and in that repetition the Egyptians saw proof that life was endless, that what falls always rises again. This is the 94th truth. The river was time itself, carrying both loss and renewal in its eternal flow. Above, the stars circled. Some never set, never disappeared below the horizon. These the Egyptians called the imperishables, shining forever, symbols of eternity. Pharaohs hoped to join them, to rest among stars that never fade. This is the 95th truth. The heavens were mirrors of eternity. Their cycles proof that nothing ends, all things return. Their myths were told in repetition. Osiris dying, Isis mourning, Horus rising. These were not tales of a distant past, but renewals. Each festival retold them. Each ritual recreated them. And in that repetition, the order of the cosmos was confirmed. This is the 96th truth. Myth in Egypt was not memory, but renewal. The past made present forever. Even death was no ending. The tomb was a doorway, the coffin a vessel, the underworld a passage. The soul journeyed not into silence, but into dawn, guided by spells, protected by gods, carried toward rebirth. This is the 97th truth. Death in Egypt was transformation, a road to light, not darkness. And so too was rest. Sleep was a small eternity, a nightly rehearsal of rebirth. In dreams the gods spoke, in silence the soul touched what lay beyond. Each night was a reminder that eternity was never far, always close, always within reach. This is the 98th truth. Every dream was a whisper of the divine, every night a reflection of eternity. To the Egyptians, comfort was found not in speed but in rhythm, not in rushing forward but in returning again and again. What is lost returns, what sets rises, what sleeps wakes. In this trust lay peace, in this rhythm lay rest. This is the 99th truth. Eternity was not beyond life but within it, woven into cycles of return. And here as you listen, you too are part of that cycle. If these words have brought you calm, if this journey through Egypt has helped you breathe slower, rest deeper, then leave your own small offering, as they once did with bread, flowers, or incense before their gods. A simple act sustains the rhythm. A like, a comment, a share, a subscription. With these gestures, you keep the light burning. You keep the cycle alive. You allow this journey to continue for yourself and for others who wander seeking rest. This is the 100th truth. To rest is already to enter eternity. And with your presence, eternity continues. Close your eyes now. Breathe with the river, with the sun, with the stars. Inhale as the day begins, exhale as it ends. You are not outside eternity. You are within it. You always have been. You always will be.
you.